Hey guys, it's Mike here, and we have some big news coming out of Japan talking about Dragon Ball Super, and more specifically the end of Dragon Ball Super. Now for a long time, fans have speculated about when Super would end, but now it seems that we finally have a date. On March 25th, the seemingly final episode of Dragon Ball Super will air in Japan. Now there's a lot of questions flying around about whether this will be the permanent end of Super, or whether it's more along the lines of a hiatus, or even how Super will end. And I'm going to do my best to address that in this video. Now a lot of people are thinking that this is a bad move, or the end of Dragon Ball as we know it. But I think this could actually be good for the health and long-term future of Dragon Ball. So without further ado, let's get into this video. Now let me first play devil's advocate and address some of the concerns and cons that could come about from the end of Dragon Ball Super. Now the first one is obvious, and that is no more weekly Dragon Ball. Since Dragon Ball Super began, we've been able to look forward to watching a brand new episode of Dragon Ball every single week, except for when they take breaks. Now of course, the first two arcs of the series were retreads of the film, so we basically were just seeing a remake of what we had already seen in film format, but once it got into Universe 6, it became a lot more interesting, and there was a lot more hype and intrigue when it came to watching every single week. Now personally for me, I don't really like watching weekly. I like to actually binge watch or to watch everything as a whole, because for me, a series is a lot like a movie, and it's just a long, more drawn out version of a movie. They're both telling the same sort of story. But for a lot of fans, this could lead to them losing interest, which is the next point I'm going to get into. And fans overall could lose interest in the Dragon Ball franchise, because Dragon Ball Super really has drummed up a lot of interest among more casual fans and fans who kind of fell away from the franchise, because people like to watch something that is new, they like to join in when there's a lot of conversation, and a lot of people like to see something as it's actually transpiring, rather than going back and rewatching all of it like I had mentioned before. And you know, for a lot of people, the interest just wasn't there after Dragon Ball Z ended, especially considering Dragon Ball GT, and we really didn't get much from Dragon Ball for a very long time until Battle of Gods, Resurrection F, and then Super came out, and that really did increase a lot of the interest in the community. So losing interest in the franchise could certainly be a con for the people who are losing interest, as well as the popularity of the Dragon Ball franchise. Now, something else that could contribute to people losing interest is the fact that a lot of story elements could possibly never be resolved. So Goku and Vegeta going to Planet Sadala is a big example, because a lot of people keep mentioning the fact that they want to see that as an arc. It's something that Kaba promised to Vegeta, that he would show him around and introduce him to the king of Sadala. And then there's a lot of other stories, like the fact that Goku and Beerus have never really had their rematch. We don't know for a fact if Goku as Ultra Instinct is on Beerus's level, or at the end of this tournament if he'll have even surpassed Beerus. We don't know why Whis is looking for someone to replace Beerus. We don't know what annoyed the Omni King and caused him to destroy those 6 universes, or what used to be in them. And there's a lot of questions about God Ki, about transformations, and about various other things that have been introduced in Dragon Ball Super, which may never be resolved. So that could definitely lead to a lot of disappointment among the fan base, as well as the show overall, because that's the next point I'm going to get into, and perhaps one of the biggest cons for Dragon Ball Super ending right now. A lot of fans will view it as a disappointment. Now, obviously for me, I've been critical of this series since pretty much the beginning, and certainly a lot of elements along the way have been a disappointment for me. However, the fact of the matter is that there's still a lot of things that Dragon Ball Super can explore. Even though we're having this big tournament between all of these universes, there's still a lot of universes that aren't participating. There's still a lot of exploration that hasn't been done. We still have barely really touched upon these universes that many are being destroyed right now. And Dragon Ball Super really never reached the heights that a lot of fans expected or wanted it to. So while a lot of people are saying that this arc might be great, the fact of the matter is Dragon Ball Super had 2 retread arcs at the beginning. The Universe 6 tournament tournament was pretty good, although a lot of people didn't really like it. And the same thing happens with the Future Trunks arc, which had so much potential, but then ended up being a big disappointment come the ending. So if Dragon Ball Super really does end permanently, and it's not on a hiatus and it doesn't come back, then I think that a lot of people could see it as being a disappointment. However, getting more into the positives of what Dragon Ball Super's ending in March could actually contribute to, I think the first one would have to be that it gives fans a break. Because let's think about this, Dragon Ball Super has been running pretty much non-stop since it first started, and a lot of anime do this. However, at 131 episodes come the ending in March, that's going to be a lot of time that we've been sitting there watching each and every week, and really I feel like this show needs a break as a result, because do we really need to see a new episode every single week? Do we really need to see this keep going for episode after episode after episode until it's so incredibly bloated, like a series like, I don't know, One Piece or Naruto, where they pump out hundreds and hundreds of episodes? And by that point, we'd have seen so much and so many arcs and so many new transformations and so many new power-ups and so on, that fans might just be tired of the show and really just want it to come to an end. So I think it's better that Dragon Ball Super and the Dragon Ball franchise does take a little bit of a break. Of course, we're still going to have the video game Dragon Ball FighterZ coming out. We're still going to have the Dragon Ball manga that is going to continue into the future. And we're still going to have the dub of Dragon Ball Super. However, I think that this show really would benefit from taking a break. And one of the reasons why is that it gives it more time to focus on this upcoming movie. The movie about the origin of Saiyan power, and we still don't really know what that's about. Now, I've seen a lot of people speculating that they think that this is going to be about not only Universe 7's Saiyans and their origins, but also the origins of the Saiyans of Universe 6 and their power. And I think that would be an interesting way to not only tie in Dragon Ball Super and the concept of the multiverse and the characters from Sadala that people do want to see further expanded upon, but at the same time, I think that it would be a great idea to kind of figure out the genealogies of these two civilizations. However, I think another big point is that if all of their top animators like Shida, Takahashi are all going to go over to this movie, do we really want to watch a Dragon Ball Super that's not going to have all of these top tier animators working on the show like they are right now? I mean, the Tournament of Power looks great. Do we want to see another arc that comes right after it that looks like episode 5, or it looks like early Dragon Ball Super like Resurrection F again? I know for a fact I don't, and a lot of anime fans I've talked to have told me that they don't really care when it comes to that. They just want to see more shows and more episodes. But overall, when Dragon Ball Super is finally done in the future, or whether it's done permanently right now, I think it'll be better long term for rewatch value if it does take this break, so that they could focus entirely on this movie and make this movie as great as it can be, because there's been some awesome Dragon Ball movies in the past, and this one certainly has a lot of potential to be great as well. And if they devote all of these resources to doing it, I can only imagine how great it's going to look and really what sort of potential it has to be great. Another thing is that it also allows the manga to catch up to the anime and maybe even surpass it, because that's one of the biggest problems I've had with the Dragon Ball Super manga since it started, where it's usually behind the anime. And especially going into the Future Trunks arc, when they decide to actually flesh out more of the arcs in the manga, it's just too far behind it for the most part. And one of the biggest problems of Dragon Ball Super for me is the fact that they really didn't have a basis to go on other than notes from Toriyama, which really is going to lead to what we've seen with a lot of inconsistencies and the show not really having as strong of a foundation as Dragon Ball and Z did. So I think if they were to continue Dragon Ball Super as a series, or start another series after this movie comes out, like Dragon Ball Ultra or Dragon Ball Ultimate or Dragon Ball Oob Story or something like that, a great idea in my opinion would be for the manga to go far past where the end of the Tournament of Power, the end of Dragon Ball Super is right now, and give us a better foundation moving forward into the future of Dragon Ball. And another thing is that it allows the dub to catch up, which, you know, the dub is super far behind where it is in Japan right now. They're just starting the Future Trunks arc. And I still like the dub, I like the Japanese and the English, so I would really like to see the dub being closer to where the anime is. Even if it's pretty much impossible for them to to catch up right now, I still think it would be great if they were going to do like a simul dub, you know, if when the episodes come out in Japan, they come out pretty shortly afterward in America. So people pretty much have instant access and they don't have to wait months and avoid all of these spoilers just to see these episodes and enjoy them the way they're meant to be seen. Another thing is talking about the structure of the show itself. It's going to give Toei, the writers, and everyone working on the Dragon Ball franchise more time to prepare and structure the future of the franchise, whether it be to give it more structure in a much stronger behind-the-scenes presence for the continuation of Super in the future, or whether it's really restructuring the franchise and preparing and being ready for each of these individual products that are going to spin off from Dragon Ball Super, if that's actually a thing that's going to happen. Because if you guys remember, when Dragon Ball Super first started, it was really rushed into production. They didn't wait for the manga, they didn't allow for a lot of pre-production to happen. Toei and Shueisha and everyone just saw how successful the Dragon Ball movies were, so they were like, okay, Battle of Gods did really well, Resurrection F did really well, let's make this into a show so that we can continue this gravy train of money as well as do it every single week, as opposed to just making a movie every single year. And as a result, the show's quality really suffered. Not only did we have to sit through another recreation of the movies we had already seen, but they also didn't have the animation staff behind it that they really needed to. They didn't really have the best showrunner that they really could have. They didn't have the best writers. Again, the manga wasn't really even a thing, and the quality really wasn't what it should have been. So taking a break, if they want to continue Super in the future, then they'll certainly be able to prepare for its return and continue this quality and be able to possibly even increase it. But if they don't continue the show and they move into other projects, well, this time will still allow them to create greater quality for those as well. And another big thing for me that I think is really important is that it gives greater reflection on Super's quality as the hype dies down. Because really, when it comes to Dragon Ball Super, hype in a lot of ways has blinded much of the fan base. A lot of the fan base think that Dragon Ball Super is the greatest show in Dragon Ball history, that it's better than Dragon Ball and Z in every way, that so many flaws that are within the context of the series aren't actually real when they certainly are, and you can objectively qualify them. And it really is very similar in a lot of ways to the Phantom Menace effect from Star Wars. As when the prequels were first coming out, a lot of fans were caught up in the fact that there was a new Star Wars movie. This is amazing. I can't believe I'm seeing another Star Wars movie in theaters in my own lifetime. And as a result, most of them were blinded to the fact that the films really weren't that good when it came to the prequels. And a lot of that Phantom Menace effect, the result of nostalgia, of hype, and the result of a lot of other factors, are causing that to happen in the Dragon Ball community as well, and for Dragon Ball Super fans. So as the months go on and the hype dies down and the Dragon Ball Super fans get more of a chance to reflect on the series, the pros and the cons, perhaps to rewatch the show multiple times before it comes back or before whatever decision is made for the future of the franchise, I think that's a great idea because it'll allow us to finally put this show into a more realistic and proper perspective, and to be able to appreciate it for what it actually is, as opposed to artificially boosting it through hype and other outside influences. Now, of course, there are some aspects that can go either way, such as the question of, is this a risk? Will stopping the show for months to work on a film pay off for Dragon Ball? And is this actually a bad idea because they could diminish interest in the brand? While I think it's possible that this upcoming Saiyan film won't be a massive success, and as a result it could hurt the franchise, as well as making any continuation of Dragon Ball Super less likely, when we look at how successful Battle of Gods and Resurrection F the movies were, and how Super has only really increased the fan base and made it perhaps more active than it's ever been before, I'm leaning towards this risk paying off. And speaking of paying off, you know, this does get into the business aspect. A lot of people are talking about how possibly not having a Dragon Ball Super or having a series running will cause Toei to lose profits in the interim while the show is not airing and while they're working on the film. But really, when when it comes down to it for me, I view it more as short-term losses versus long-term gains. Sure, Dragon Ball as a franchise might lose some money during this period of time, because they're not going to have a show out, they're not going to have a movie out until like December. So aside from the video game and the manga, this could result in not only a loss in interest, but a loss in profits and revenue. And the loss of interest, of course, could lead to less people buying merchandise. But again, Dragon Ball FighterZ is going to be out. I'm sure we'll be getting trailers throughout the year kind of telling us what's really in store for us in the movie. And really, if this movie is a big success like the past two films have been, and it gets the Dragon Ball fans really hyped up for a continuation of the story, whether it be Super or whether it be something else in the future, I think that it's certainly going to lead for long-term gains. And even though it is a risk that has a chance of not paying off, I think there's certainly a big possibility that it'll pay off even more than just continually running Dragon Ball Super. So when it comes down to this, is this actually the end of Dragon Ball Super? I have my doubts right now, as the series is successful and there's still a lot more places to go with the story. But even if it does end, I think this would be a great opportunity to shift the direction of Dragon Ball. They can get back into doing movies again, like Battle of Gods and Resurrection F. And like those films, the future films could continue the story. Now, we would have to wait for each individual installment, but really, we waited so long before Battle of Gods came out and after Dragon Ball Z and GT ended, that I think we could wait a little bit longer. And in the meantime, they could even release spin-off series or specials about the various Z fighters, or even other characters that Dragon Ball Super introduced, like Hit, the Pride Troopers, or even a character like Jocko. So from this point of view, one series could give way to many. As for how it will actually end, if it's really the end of the series for good, I would like to see it go up to the end of Z. That's actually what I've wanted for a long time now. And they can show Goten and Trunks as young adults, Pan around the age she was at the end of Z, Gohan could become more successful at his job, and we could see Goku and Vegeta living in peacetime. Perhaps they could even do an episode kind of like they did in Dragon Ball Z with the episode He's Always Late, where we see everyone hanging out at a party, or perhaps to keep it more in line with what Bulma said in the manga at the end of Dragon Ball Z, how she hadn't seen Goku for 5 years. Assuming that's still something they're paying attention to, maybe they can have a party and Goku just doesn't show up. But a great way to actually end it, to like end off the final episode, I think, would be Goku and friends going off to the tournament, just like they did at the end of Z. And we know that's all still happening within the canon story of Dragon Ball. As far as we know, the end of Z with Oob has not changed. Now, as far as Dragon Ball GT goes, I think it's probably gone from the story for good. So it's possible that if Super ends, it's so a new series that takes place after Goku and Oob leave the tournament can begin. Maybe this will go into the 5 years before GT, or maybe it'll just totally overlap and erase it. Now, while I'm worried that Toei may try to cram in a bunch of GT continuity into the story before it ends, like Pilaf wishing to become older, God Key no longer being a thing, and Beerus and Whis and everyone just vanishing forever, it seems like we're almost in the clear as far as all of that goes. So finally, how will this affect YouTube and Laughingstock Media? A lot of people are wondering if this will be the end of Dragon Ball YouTubers, or if I or others will just stop uploading. But honestly, I've been making videos on YouTube before Super was even announced. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, and I always try to keep it real with you guys and say what I honestly feel, and that is that Dragon Ball Super really pigeonholed Dragon Ball content. Everything had to be about Super. What happens next week? What will happen in the coming weeks? And on the content went. And you could really see this with how big some of people's Super reviews and spoiler videos were. And now, aside from series reviews and possible arc reviews, those will be done. And that doesn't really affect me because I stopped doing weekly Super reviews and I don't talk about spoilers anyway. Now, when I first started, I could talk about whatever I wanted to. Dragon Ball, Z, GT, the movies, or even what could happen in the future. So with Super gone, while speculation and theory videos will obviously still be a thing, the landscape may shift back to where I can continue to make more content about all of Dragon Ball, which I've already kind of been shifting into. Honestly, I'm more concerned about making content that will be long-lasting and relevant even years from now after Super and the Dragon Ball franchise franchise are long done. Now, I know it's a fact that many in the fan base are only interested in Dragon Ball Super, and that's because it's new, it's relevant, they can talk to their friends about it, and so on. And I'm sure many of them will leave and stop watching Dragon Ball videos. But it's not like my channel is one that blew up immediately when Super was announced and thrived on Super alone, so this could affect viewership and interest across the board, but I've accepted at this point with my channel that it may take me a little bit longer to reach 100k and to really grow and possibly blow up, but in my opinion, a slow and steady climb is better than flying too close to the sun and then crashing down to Earth as a result. But we'll see just how many of the YouTubers who currently thrive on spoilers, clickbait, and pedantically bandwagoning the show will crash and burn themselves in the coming months. But I'm excited to finally be getting back into discussing all of Dragon Ball, and I think the channel will be even better for it. I'd also like to talk more about other anime and animated series in the future as well. For example, you can find my most recent video of Yu Yu Hakusho where I ranked all of the arcs on my channel. So I'm not going anywhere, and in fact, if you follow my second channel, Laughingstock Cinema, I'm actually expanding my content, and I very much recommend checking out Laughingstock Cinema in the end screen and description of this video, because I'm going to be talking a lot about movies and TV shows over there in the future. So is this really the end of Dragon Ball Super? Maybe, but I suspect Dragon Ball has a lot more left up its sleeve. So as I always say, guys, stick around, because there will still be a lot more content to come in the future. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you can see all of my content right away when it comes out.
Yeah, and you better subscribe and enable those notifications because I'm not going anywhere.